Good morning, everyone. Thank you so very much for inviting me to share some sauce with you today to open up this year's STEM Forward conference. I know that you all will be spending most of today really connecting around issues on tech and innovation, strategy, and also exploring ways to inspire a deeper impact within your companies and communities. And the slate of impressive speakers that are on the agenda today are actually some of my own personal tech sheroes and icons. So I will only, if I may, take just a little bit of your time today to share some insights with you from my journey as both founder and CEO of Black Girls Code that'll hopefully lay the foundation for a day that's both full of inspiration as well as hope. Now, prior to the pandemic, I would spend a large amount of my time as the CEO of Black Girls Code on the road, speaking to audiences literally all over the world. In those travels, I'm always filled with this tremendous sense of joy and hope when I'm in a physical space and I'm able to look out at a room that's predominantly filled with women in leadership. It's very much that same feeling that I get on the now unfortunate, sometimes rare occasion when I'm able to sit in on a Black Girls Code class. In those rooms and virtual spaces, there is this what I would call a powerful female energy, and something magic happens. It's an opportunity to create more rooms like those at BGC, which fuels my mission daily and drives me forward with this hunger, if you will, to increase diversity in tech leadership in this industry that we love. And in every industry, really, that is touched by tech. And I find it hard to think of one that isn't. This is the vision and then I would say the motivator that keeps me going as the founder of Black Girls Code. And it especially is something that gives me a little bit of foundation in the midst of uncertainty. And it drives me forward with this hunger, if you will, to increase and create more safe spaces where women and girls are both celebrated, but most importantly, where we are heard and acknowledged for our strengths and our talents. I'm convinced that the future success of our society relies firmly on an investment in women as both innovators, as leaders, and as change makers. Now, I'm speaking to you today from my office here in Oakland, California, and this year marks 10 years since BGC was founded in a really small basement computer lab in a San Francisco neighborhood across the bridge called Bayview Hunters Point. We started out, as the story goes, and it's really true, with only 6 computers to accommodate this unexpected overflow of 10 students that we had in our very first pilot program. At the time, I think I would probably consider myself or call myself just a nerdy mom. I was fresh out of the biotech industry and I was raising a geeky daughter. My daughter was 12 years old at the time and she was obsessed, both then and now, with computer gaming. Now, my daughter Kai had wanted to be many things and through the years as she was growing up. Everything from a veterinarian to a bass guitarist to an artist, but I never really thought that she would elect to follow in my footsteps. But that's exactly what she did. And she chose this career with a passion for computer science and engineering. She's now, 10 years later, a rising college senior, majoring in computer science and planning to land her dream job in just a few short months. I got my fingers crossed. My personal journey as a young woman in engineering, it actually started very much like my daughter Kai's did some 40 plus years ago. I grew up in the inner city neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee, and I did not see anyone who looked like me who was an engineer, let alone a computer scientist. So by the time that I was in one of my first college planning sessions in my high school senior year, speaking with my guidance counselors, it was actually those women who suggested I consider a study in engineering, a field at the time that was hungry for more women and especially for more students of color to enter STEM fields. And this growing tech industry was just beginning to explode from this nascent idea in the mid 80s. When I began college at Vanderbilt University, I graduated with a major in electrical engineering and a minor in CS. And it was a peak moment, so to speak, for women in computer science. At the time, women received approximately 30% or so of the bachelor's degrees awarded in computer science. But since that time, those numbers have plummeted and declined drastically. Women currently only receive about 12% of the bachelor's degrees awarded in computer science. And yet, for Black and Brown women, these numbers do what I say fall off a virtual cliff. Black women only receive about 3% of the degrees awarded in computer science, and for Latinas, this number is less than 2%. Once I recognized as a mother that my daughter Kai was going to perhaps follow in my footsteps, I knew I wanted to create a different outcome for her, an outcome that perhaps was more equitable and more supportive in terms of a community in tech for girls from marginalized communities like her. Now, even though we lived right here in the Bay Area, my daughter Kai had unlimited access to a tech ecosystem that I could only dream about at her age. But she was still very much relegated by limited societal notions and expectations, which were much more comfortable with girls as consumers of technology, but not really the creators of it. And I wanted to change that with this work with Black Girls Code. When we launched in 2011, we had what I call a hairy, audacious goal from our friends at Google to train 1 million young women to code by 2040. We've been building steadily but surely over the past 10 years and have trained almost 40,000 students to date. But working to reach that goal, it comes with daily, I want to even say hourly struggles at sometimes. But it also comes with these moments of great joy, as well as great pride in the community and the movement, if you will, that we've built. But the struggle, as I say, is real. To break barriers as a female founder with a mission to prove that women are capable and well equipped to succeed in a male dominated industry, it comes with daily challenges that happen moment by moment. Yet no year tested me, and I would say other working women like me, as much as 2020 did. On January 21st, the first US case of COVID 19 was confirmed in Snohomish County, Washington. Now, before long in Seattle, one of our BGC chapter cities, it became the epicenter, if you will, of this pandemic that would eventually spread quickly across the country and the world, affecting our entire network of chapters all over the US as well as in Johannesburg. It affected our volunteers, our staff, and of course, our students and families. By early March, we were canceling every single one of our in person workshops as most of the country was entering this phase of lockdown. Now, similarly, working mothers all over the world were finding themselves thrust in these dual roles, if you will, of navigating this quote new normal of working from home if they could, and also becoming not only the family caregivers, but also in many cases the primary educators for both their sons and their daughters, as schools all over the world shuttered. And even any continued learning that was being offered was being done virtually in an online format that many of us were still unfamiliar with. For these moms, the duality of these duties were a struggle, but many moms did not even have that access and did not fare nearly as well. Of the 140 some thousand jobs lost in the US alone by December 2020, all of them, all of them were held by women. In fact, women bear the brunt of the social and economic impact of the COVID pandemic. This impact was amplified for women from marginalized communities who were at greater risk for both infection and loss of livelihood, since they are overwhelmingly in the lower paying service industry jobs most impacted by this pandemic. These economic impacts were devastating to both women and families all over the world. The UN Women's Council did a report called From Insights to Action, and it showed that the pandemic will push 96 million people into extreme poverty by the end of 2021, 47 million of whom are women and girls. This will bring the total number of women and girls living on US dollar 190 or less, US dollar 190 or less, to 435 million. Let that sink in. The pandemic induced a poverty surge will also widen the gender poverty gap. And this means that more women will be pushed into extreme poverty than men. And this is especially the case for those aged 25 to 34 who are at the height of their productive and family formation period. These dire consequences of the pandemic are things that stay on my mind as a woman, not just building a tech ecosystem built on diversity and inclusion, but as a social activist. Luckily for Black Girls Code, we weren't faced with a call to defer our work indefinitely, as so many other women were. We were able to pivot our program model to a virtual delivery method, and we answered a call to action by responding with a call to serve from both our working parents, from our volunteers, and even in some cases from our students themselves. In fact, as we look back on the impact on the pandemic for BGC, we believe it highlighted even more this dire need for connectedness in Black and Brown communities and reinforced our purpose to diversify the tech workforce and tech leadership ranks so that our future is defined by a technology sector that serves everyone equitably, but especially women who have been most marginalized, which provides economic access and opportunity to women who have traditionally been left behind. Now, one of the co-authors of the same UN report quoted, women typically earn less and hold less secure jobs than men. So with plummeting economic activity, women are particularly vulnerable to layoffs and a loss of livelihood. When I think of our roles as women in tech and in leadership in particular, I cannot help but see our calling, if you will, as deeply rooted in something beyond just getting more women and people of color into tech. Our calling is rooted in a social activism and justice, if you will, to level the playing field. While the halls of technology are probably more apt to shine a light on one of the two Gates whose name is Bill, I'd like to lift up his better half and talk a bit about the activism and contributions of Melinda today. Through her philanthropic work, Melinda Gates has observed gender disparity literally all over the world. I think one of the clearest and perhaps most powerful statements she's made is that poverty is quote unquote sexist. She wrote this article a couple of years ago in Time magazine. And in this article, she stated something that really struck me in this journey to create more equity in the tech industry. In this article, Melinda said that the fact that so many women's potential is going unrealized is a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity. And it's an opportunity because if we recognize, reduce, and redistribute the burden of work that's holding women back, they're going to use that extra little bit of time to accomplish great things. So, if millions more women had a chance to invest in themselves and their ideas, they could literally transform the world. Melinda and her focus on shining a light on the gender divide for women, and even more recently, her work specifically around women of color in the tech industry and beyond, is something that I think is truly transformative and transformational, not just for this generation, but for generations to follow. I see Melinda's activism in tech as a model for how we as women leaders can use our collective voices and also our privilege, because we absolutely have it, as a catalyst for change. In the same article, Melinda makes a comment that tech is changing lives. And so women have to be able to have their great ideas come forward, not just a seat at the table, but have their great ideas come forward to help change society for better. When I think of opportunities that we have as women leaders, especially in moments like this very conference, to convene the best and brightest amongst us and share these ideas, it is the truest example of how we use our collective voice to bring ideas forward for those who are both sung and unsung heroes of our time. It's the work of the Melinda Gates, the Ellen Powells, the Tracy Childs, the Lucy Sanders, and so many other women leaders in tech. As I said, both those who are sung and unsung, that inspires me daily to continue to create change in the tech ecosystem for women and girls in the hope that their future contributions will, as Melinda says, transform the world. I have been doing this work for the past 10 years for no other reason but that I believe in our power as women in leadership. Now, it doesn't mean that for me, as a woman who has had some form of success with this organization called Black Girls Code, that those days don't get hard. They do. There's some days where I feel to my very core that we will never be able to make the change that we hope to see for our young women and girls like my daughter Kai. But when I take a step back and I look at girls who have been in our program since 2012, who are now leaders in their own right in their schools, in their communities, and eventually in the world, I have a renewed sense of hope. I have a renewed sense of hope when I am available and able to speak to conferences like this, which elevate the voices of women. It's that small voice inside that says we belong. And we've been here all the time. But now is the time for us to step up into our fullest presence as the leaders and creators of the future. We as women in this ecosystem are called to do more in this moment. We are called to do something more than just make space at this table, if you will, for only our own dreams, for only our own goals and our own ambitions. That is great. We must do that. But I believe we are called to also do something else that is very, very important if we want to create true lasting change and disconnect these systemic issues that have plagued our industry for so long. I believe we are called to shake up this system a little bit. I believe we're called to make space at the table for others to become leaders. And activists, even, who push against these structural changes in a system that prevents more women from reaching their fullest potential each and every day. The focus for me on creating space for women and girls in the field of technology in our work can really be truly transformative, but even more so, I believe it's revolutionary. But not just for the potential, if you will, market benefits to these large tech companies who stand to profit from our great ideas and the net effects of the greater inclusion that innovation may bring forth. No, not for that, but because women and girls matter in and of themselves. And that's it. Strategy is important in building an equitable world, but this reminder that we matter, intrinsically we matter, self evidently we matter, is part of the moral core of the work we must all do as women leaders every day, as what I call tech activists. So, as I close and as you prepare for the rest of today's conference, I want to invite us all to make a commitment together. Each of you can lead us toward greater gender equity in technology in at least three ways. First, inside your companies, you are the best advocates for hiring and promoting other women. We must lift each other up as we climb. Be empowered to ask what the strategy is for your companies to get there and help improve it if it is needed, and defend it unequivocally when it's questioned. Secondly, your time is your most valuable asset. Inside your company, be intentional about mentorship. And if you've been blessed to be in positions to lay rungs on the ladder, lift up other women, be a sponsor, support and champion each other, guide and advise the younger women who are entering your workforce as well as inside and outside of your company. In your daily work outside of work, find a way to bring your tech and leadership skills to bear in your community. All of our communities, wherever we live and work, have needs that we can use our skills, our talents, and gifts to meet. And finally, last but not least, for our male allies in roles of leadership and authority, look across your teams. I need you to look across your teams. Are there women and people of color on your team? And if there are there more than two? If not, that's not enough. Do more and bring in more and open up opportunities for more. If necessary, not only add another seat at the table, but I'm going to ask you to get up and make space for those who have traditionally been left out and locked out. If you take nothing from our words today, I hope that you agree that our charge as women tech leaders is about so much more than just securing our own seat at the table. It's about much more than climbing these ladders alone. Once we have arrived and once we are able to stand fully in our space, that's the moment when I believe the time is ripe to do so much more. That's when it's time to put on our tech activist hats and get to work. I have the utmost confidence that together, we as women leaders can transform the world. It's our time. Thank you so much. I wanted to end these comments with just answering also a few questions that were solicited from the audience and social media ahead of time before I tossed the mic to the next wonderful set of speakers. And I chose three that I really wanted to dive into, and I hope these three questions resonate with each of you. I wanted to start out by this question that I received from Annie. And the question was, you've accomplished a lot in your career. Do you still encounter barriers and how do you overcome them? My answer to this is absolutely, I do. I mean, I shared a little bit during my talk, but I've experienced barriers all along my walk and my journey as founder of BGC. In many of my travels, I talk about and how in the beginning I couldn't raise money for Black Girls Code because no one wanted to fund an organization called Black Girls Code. As we started to gain momentum and we started to have supporters around us, we found that we continually had barriers to raise enough funds to meet the demand of our programs. And now, as we started to transition to this next phase of growth, there's still challenges on how do we create a culture that's welcoming? How do we get in the right rooms? How do we make programs that really meet the needs of our girls? And then the challenges never stop. For me, the way to overcome those challenges is to consistently be in this mode of learning, adopting a growth mindset, which doesn't allow me to penalize myself when I make an error, when I make a misstep. The biggest growth process that I have gone through has been over the last 2 years, 2020 and now 2021 post pandemic, but having a safe space where I can land, strong counselors and consultants and sponsors and mentors that help me grow are key to how I push through those barriers. And I also think it's important to have the strong sense of self efficacy so that when those barriers happen and those failures, you don't internalize them, but you use those as lessons, which is all failure really is meant to be, to move on to the next phase. And I hope that is helpful. The second question I wanted to answer was from Angel, and she says, what has been your biggest win in STEM? And was it starting Black Girls Code or did it come before that? I kind of chuckled when I read this question because before Black Girls Code, my biggest win in STEM was graduating from college with a degree in STEM, primarily because it was so hard. It was such a difficult journey. Being a student in the mid 80s in electrical engineering and not having any other women students in most of my classes. I had absolutely no women as professors and very limited students of color in the engineering school overall was hard. It took me years to learn how to survive and then another 2 years to learn how to thrive as a student. I almost flunked out of college in my sophomore year. I had about a 1.9 GPA and I had to fight my way back to being on the dean's list in my last 2 years. It was difficult. So I remember vividly when I walked across that stage at Vanderbilt and received that degree, it was one of the hardest achievements that I've ever been able to acquire for myself. And the chuckle is because now, so many years later, the biggest achievement for myself in STEM is this forthcoming graduation of my daughter with a degree in computer science. And I laugh about that, but I also say that it makes me a little bit sad as well. Not only has my daughter experienced some of the same barriers that I did as a young woman as in STEM, I have had to fight to make sure she has equitable access all throughout her journey, from being in a class where she felt marginalized to being in places where she didn't really have supportive mentors and I would say bosses, if you will, in some of her tech experiences. Her journey has not been without some of the same challenges that I experienced as a young Black woman majoring in engineering and starting my engineering career 30 plus years ago. I think that's unfortunate, and it kind of speaks to the work we still have to do to create an industry that looks more like us, that is welcoming to us, and really creates these safe spaces where Black girl genius and the genius of women can thrive. So those are my two greatest accomplishments, but it also is, I would say, the foundation of this work that I'm doing consistently now to make sure the road is perhaps a little bit clearer for women that are coming behind us, and the women that'll be the leaders for the future. Thank you for that wonderful question, Angel. Last but not least, I'll end with this last question that was sent to me by Amanda. And Amanda's question was, what are some resources that are useful for young women to engage in STEM and build confidence? Um, without a doubt, organizations like Black Girls Code, Women Who Code, Girls Who Code, Technovation, these communities of other women that are on similar journeys, it is a critical part of creating what I call this stickiness or staying power for women in STEM. Even this very conference that we're participating in today, these moments, if you will, where we are able to convene with each other and create safe spaces to hear each other's thoughts, ideas, and to support each other's journey are crucial. Those are the foundations of self-efficacy and confidence, both in Black Girls Code, but also for women in STEM in general. So I really challenge everyone who's participating in the conference today to reach out to get to know someone you may not have known before. Send a note to the speaker following the conference asking if you can have a bit of time to learn a little bit more about their journey. Build connections, because these bonds that we create as women leaders are critical for each and every one of our successes. That is how we build confidence. That is how we push through. That is how we elevate collectively our voices and create real change in this industry. I hope those little tidbits were helpful in terms of really answering some questions that you all may have. But I really just want to challenge you all and end with, you have everything you need to attain whatever goals and dreams you have as a woman in STEM. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't. We already have that within. So find the space as well as the community that helps you to shine. And once you get there in that shine and glow, elevate another sister with you.